going to go ahead and start it.
Yes, we're good.
Yeah.
Okay, hello everybody. Okay, talking to microphone's different. Hi everybody in the room and online and people that are going to watch this later. We are so glad that you're here. We might have a few people coming in and we're just excited to be here. We've got a great panel ready to go, and I thought we would just introduce ourselves and just kind of go down the line. We've got a lot of great questions from people that are here and some questions that we prepared, and then if you have any along the way, just yell now or raise your hand, whatever you want to do. Let's start with you, Jimmy. You can introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Jim Wright. I'm with Partners Resource Network. Partners Resource Network is a PTI, Parent Training and Information Center. In the IDA law, every state has at least one PTI. Texas is so large that we have actually 4 PTIs. We have the PAC project, which is the area that we're in. That's Fort Worth, Dallas, East Texas, as far as like Texarkana and the Pittsburgh area. And then the PATH project is down in the Houston coastal area. Team project is the San Antonio, Austin, kind of central Texas kind of area. And then the PIN project is everything west of there. So geographically, it's like as big as all of the 3 projects put together, but population-wise, it's the smallest. And so what a PTI is we help, we're funded by the Department of Education, and we help families that have children with disabilities from the ages of 0 to 26. We help them to navigate the special education system. We do it through consultations. We have workshops, webinars, events like this. And we help parents understand the disability, what resources are out in the community. And basically, if you feel like you're stuck or you're having trouble understanding things, we're there to help you get unstuck, to figure things out. And because we're grant funded, all of our services are free.
Ooh, free's good.
Yeah, you guys do a lot. Sign up for the newsletter. My name is Beth McGaw, and I am the owner of Launchpad Consulting Group. I primarily do college consulting with all students, but my specialty, I do specialize in working with students with learning disabilities, ADHD, and on the spectrum. I also help with that transition to college and the career search. I am a member, this is important when you're looking for a consultant. I'm a member of the IECA. I'm an educational consultant, so being a member of an organization like that means that you are held to ethical standards, and I have to get training while I'm a member, and I have to visit colleges to make sure that I'm up to date on all of that. So I have a bunch of other credentials, but I'd say the most important one is that I'm a parent of 3 adult sons, and my youngest one had learning disabilities and ADHD, so I shepherded him through school, and then that transition to college, and he did graduate from college, so now we're doing the career thing. So I think I'm on the board of StandUpLD, so I'm very passionate about this organization. They do great work, and so pass it on.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for having me here. My name is Dr. Reagan Brown, and I am currently an instructional coach, mentor, coordinator, and I also work with 8th and 9th grade students at Fairhill School. I absolutely love working at Fairhill because our school is for students with learning differences, and we get a chance to see them unlock the potential that they sometimes didn't know that they had. So this year I'm excited because we are working on a class called PATH, and we are creating that path and getting that class accredited, and it's focused on executive function. This is my first time here with StandUpLD. Thank you again for the privilege, and I'm just ready to get started and learn from you all as well. Thank you.
Oh, we're glad you're here. My name's Crystal Turner, and I am an occupational therapist for many, many years. My husband and I have 3 teenage boys, so it's very, very, very active at my house all the time. And I have worked mostly in school systems and outpatient therapy for kiddos with everything from learning differences to dyslexia to ADHD to autism, kind of everything. And now I currently work for, well, I have my own firm too, but I work for Kinspire, and they are a company that we offer real-time parent coaching for, well, it's for parents, and it's very specific. It's from an OT, and there's very specific, practical, affordable strategies that you can implement, but in all areas of their life. So at home, at school, in sports, whatever they're doing, and then through the website, you can share those interventions or strategies with everyone in their life. So parents, teachers, daycare, sports coaches, or wherever, extended family, whoever's in their life, so that you have a really unified approach to to what you're trying to accomplish. So it's really exciting and a lot of fun. And so I have a few questions here from us and some from you out there. And so I think we're just going to ask some questions, and we'll pass the microphone back and forth if you have anything to offer. And so the first one is, what is the difference between a 504 and an IEP? I'm handing it straight to Jim to start.
Well, I think the biggest difference is that the definition of a 504 it's a civil rights law. It's a person that has a disability that can't be discriminated against. And so Texas has utilized 504 plans quite extensively as an educational tool to provide services and accommodations under that moniker. And they have to have an evaluation, or they both have to have an evaluation. They have to have a staffing. Now, the difference between a 504 and a IDA or IEP is that in the IEP, the parents are required participants of the meeting, and in the 504, they can be invited, or they can have the meeting without the parents. So that's a pretty big difference there. And then goals are a big part of an IEP. We have to have educational need and goals to achieve there, to measure and all that. And the 504 would just necessarily be mostly accommodations and identifying the supports of that. So they both can be effective in supporting children with disabilities and needs, but there are some key differences that if your child is still struggling on 504, it might be a good idea to ask them a further evaluation for services under an IEP, to see if those maybe unidentified needs could be more formalized, or found with formalized testing to try to figure out to meet the needs of the students.
Can I ask you a question, Jim?
Sure.
As you were talking, I was thinking, so does an IEP and a 504 hold up in the private school setting?
Why don't you give a private person that?
Most private schools, especially learning different schools, it's all built in, so they don't necessarily need the 504 plan because we have the flexibility to provide those services. We do have meetings where we honor what was sent over from their previous school. We also have 504 meetings just to go over their plans. But in the private school, especially learning different schools, it's already built in, and we have the tools to provide all of those accommodations.
So any organization that takes any type of federal funding are required to follow 504 accommodations, whether it be a workplace, in higher education, private school, because there are many different forms of money that grants come from. They're not just through the education fund like that. So if you have a truly private institution that takes zero federal funds, then legally they would not have to follow those type of accommodations. But it's since a 504 is a civil rights law, it's against the law to discriminate against somebody with a disability. So that does give them some protections regardless of what school setting they're in.
Real quick question, what about charter schools? Where do they fall?
Okay, a charter school is a public school. And so a charter school is under obligations to meet any need a child has as a what we call a local education agency, a local independent school district. So they have to have a special ed department. They have to meet the needs of all students. Now, do they do a great job of that? I would say when they first started, that was questionable, but I think quite a few of them have actually gotten more educated through various means of education. That they do have these responsibilities and these obligations, and they are doing a better job by far. So there's been a growth cycle there because charter schools have been around for how long, like 15 years or something like that, and they've been really growing in the last 5 or 10 years. So just like every local school, charter school, there's going to be some that meet certain needs better than other needs, but that's not because of what they're obligated to do.
Okay, wow.
Another question?
Yeah,
Oh, yes. I'll repeat your question.
I may be getting ahead of things asking
Okay.
this, and I may not be asking it at the right time either. So, if your child, when my child goes to Fairfield, if your child goes to a school for learning differences that specializes in that type of environment, you no longer have a current IEP 504 or anything else. So you move forward in the system, and if your child either goes back into a regular school or has the desire to go on to college, you don't have that backup of having where's your current 504, where's your current, well, we don't have it because we go to a school already for learning differences, so it's not necessary. So how does that play into this?
Let me summarize your question real quick, and then you can probably answer that really well. So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the question was if you have a student that is going to a private school for learning differences, so that then they do not need their IEP or 504s anymore, but then they're going back to a public school, or they're transitioning to a college, what is their next step, or where is that? What happens next?
Go ahead.
In most cases, we've had some students who have left the private sector and gone to public school. They usually have, some schools will have like an emergency ARD, depending on the student's testing. So they'll have an emergency ARD or just a regular ARD at the beginning of that school year to review the accommodations. I'm thinking of a specific student, a middle school student who recently went into a public school. They have another ARD to update their current accommodations, goals, and resources that they'll need.
Yeah, so they would have that ARD with the public school in order to update what they need. But as far as transition to college, then you actually have documentation, or should have documentation, psychoeducational evaluations that you've done, because when you go to college, your IEP doesn't follow you. You no longer have an IEP. Your 504 can, but it's only to get accommodations that you might need in college. So it's totally different. So you wouldn't really have to, for college, have to worry about it too much, but you would need that current psychoeducational evaluation.
So,
Well, on what she's saying is to get the accommodations for your SATs, your ACTs, many of those students will actually retest junior year, per se, right?
Right.
And that can carry you into college.
So in regard to testing, ACT, SAT testing, if you're at the private school, yes, you will have the accommodations there, but money, that normally is based on that psychoeducational evaluation.
Yeah.
So no matter what, you have to have that documentation to get the accommodations for testing and also to take you into college.
Yeah, as far as there's two different questions. One's a different answer for college and one's for the school.
Right.
For college, they say recent testing.
Right.
And recent testing can be defined between 3 years to 5 years, preferably less than 3 years, is what I hear from parents that go to that next level. And so I don't think there's anything written in statute that says X number of years. It just says recent. So that can be interpreted by social norms, I guess. But as far as the public school is, local school districts have the obligation for child find up until they exit the public school system. So if you want to get testing, you can still request your local school district to do testing while they're in private school. Now it gets a little trickier. Who does that testing? You know, I want to make sure I say this correctly, and then it's usually the school district that the private school is in, as opposed to where you live, because it could be. We travel a lot in this area. Everything we cross school districts, and so that's how the child find, and they have something called proportional services. You know, so there's like a related services such as speech, OT, that type of thing. You could possibly get those services for your child in the private setting from that local school district. It's not guaranteed, because as long as they're meeting their proportional need, because there's multiple private schools in each school district. I don't know what that magic formula is. It seems to be kind of a secret, but that's what the law says. You had a follow-up questions?
That was my question, was to ask if does that testing have to occur? Can the testing occur through the public school, even though my child's in the private school?
They can, yes.
Okay, so I got a question now from someone in our audience. It says, I didn't do this part. Okay. It says, how do we get our 8th grader? This is a great question. We get asked this a lot. How do we get our 8th grader to actually use the tools available to them? If they're not interested in advocating for themselves or refuse to use their agenda or whatever strategies, how do we get them to use some of their tools? I'll let y'all go first. I have a little bit of thought, but y'all probably have a lot of insight.
That is an ongoing, is that your question? That is an ongoing issue. And 8th grade is that sweet spot where they want the autonomy, but they still need the support, but they're not willing to say that they need the support. And it does not happen overnight. And to get the buy-in, it has to relate to something in real life. If you have real life conversations with them, whether it's something related to driving, or because we know that they're getting ready to take their driving test, or a job, or anything that relates to something that they're interested in, they have to have the buy-in and the relatability before they can buy in. It does not happen the first 6 weeks. It does not happen the second 6 weeks. Sometimes we start to see a little glimmer in the third 6 weeks, but it's being consistent and teaching the process over and over, and also having those conversations like, well, what do you think? Or let me know what you think about this, or how would you go about answering this, or what system works for you? Because they need that ownership at that age, and you want them to understand that you're listening to them and you value their opinion to get the buy-in. Because if we continue to impose our thoughts on them, they just shut off after, well, I think that, well, when I was in, okay, but we're not. help me understand what you're using to move forward.
Yeah, so, yeah, from an OT perspective, it's very similar to what you were saying is and I do this with kind of all areas of OT, not just these strategies, but they have to have some kind of buy-in. And and I start with a lot of these strategies knowing that a lot of them are not going to work initially. We're just throwing a bunch of stuff out there in the first 6 weeks. We're throwing everything out there that we can think of, every app, every planner, paper, digital, audio, whatever we can try. And I know up front, some of it's not going to work, and that's okay, because that's going to help us narrow down what is going to work.
Yes.
And then, so then it's implementing that and having them, like you said, take ownership of like, hey, why don't you try to find an app or a planner that you think would work, and why don't you come and show me? I'd love to see what you think. And sometimes they come up with some really great stuff I haven't found yet. And so I also do that. I really try to have them do a lot of buy-in at that age, because you could have the best strategies, and if they're not going to do it, then so that's one strategy.
So what's my motivation?
Yeah.
Is it to make my parents happy? Is it to meet my own needs? How do we learn as people? I'm kind of dumb. I learn by my mistakes. And we don't ever let our kids make mistakes. What's their motivation to learn? So it's a real balance, because we want our kids to be successful. But if we're propping them up so much that when we're not there and they don't know how to handle their own lack of success, they're going to fall farther and harder. And so this is a great age to make lots of mistakes. It's a great age to really let them, because I get calls a lot of time, I'm working with my child, 2.5 hours at homework, and I'm looking on their file, and I'm looking on the thing. The teacher won't put it up there, and I don't know what the homework is, and, we're struggling so much everything, but the school sees nothing because they see this end product of the parents' work. So, from the school's point of view, they're doing fine. I mean, maybe the parent gets a little upset their grade's not as good as they want their grade to be. I don't know. But if your child is struggling and we support them too much at home, that can almost be a bigger detriment than letting them, figure out where they're at. Because if the school can identify the struggles and it's, 100% their work, sometimes it's a little bit easier to identify those needs, everything like that. So it is a tough, proposition to figure out where that line is. How much do we support? How much do we let them struggle? Everything, and that's and everybody has their own answer, their own comfort level like that. But if you don't let them do it in 8th grade, and you're asking the same question in 11th grade, you're going to be in a world of hurt when they get to that next level. Or you may be paying a lot of extra money for it, one way or the other. But having the child define what success is also part of it, because for some kids that have a lot of, they're high performing like that, failure is a 92 versus a 98, and that's ridiculous, but that's what success is for them. And so we have to figure out, is it the success turning their homework in on time, or is it knowing what their homework is? I still ask my son, who's gifted, twice exceptional, applying for colleges and all that kind of stuff, so what do we got to accomplish this week? And that's all I ask him. But that's enough to get him to start thinking about, oh yeah, I've got this test that I should probably start studying at 9 o'clock instead of 12 o'clock for the next day, and I mean, he's pretty mature and all that kind of stuff. But if you have an 8th grader, maybe not this week, but what do we have to do for tomorrow? And just ask the question. And then, if we have a big disconnect, just kind of write down their answers. And then you can have a parent-teacher conference if you want to go that way and say, when he comes home, this is what he thinks he has to do. And then ask him, what is your suggestions to help build this skill? Because they have lots of tools, they have lots of training like that. But until they can identify that is a big issue that they can see, then you can work together to try to solve that issue. And there's no one strategy that works for all, but it's kind of a mindset that you have to let them, I don't want to say figure it out, but define what success is, define what the acceptable learning opportunity, and then kind of get that data there and then build from that.
Well, those are all excellent answers, and I don't have a whole lot to share other than you're right. 8th grade, middle school is a good time to learn these missteps, because once they get into 9th grade, those grades count if they're going to go to college. But I will share with you that everybody's going to find their place. So even if they don't do so well in 9th grade, there's still a place for them after they graduate. And I will tell you that I have a very small caseload. I'd like to be very individualized with my students. And the student that I have that has the lowest GPA has applied to 8 schools. He was the first one to get accepted, and he's already been accepted at 4 schools, under a 3.0. He did not do well in 9th grade, and he figured it out in 10th. I guess I better start working. So there's hope, is what I'm saying, and some kids just need time.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I would say the last thing is that, I'm caught on it, and this might be a challenging skill to learn as a parent at first or a teacher, but to encourage them anytime you see a glimmer of them independently using any strategy you've ever taught them. Wow, you opened your planner today. Great job. They didn't use it. They didn't do anything else with it. You have their planner today. Okay, great. Just any tiny little thing, because, a lot of times they hear so much. They're just so used to people telling them what to do and kind of being disappointed sometimes that even just that little tiny, like, oh, wow, okay, great. How you planned, you did 5 minutes of homework, okay. And that's not ideal, but just look for those little windows that you could encourage. Is always really good. So so the question I have is the one that I get asked the most across all settings from parents and educators. What the heck is OT, and how are you helping any students with learning differences? Because we have a funny name. And so it basically, OTs can work with any age, but for the school age and college age, it can be in a school setting or outpatient, but we're talking more about academics. So in a school setting, an OT would evaluate some, like their visual perceptual and their fine motor and their executive functioning, but we look at their functional performance at school. Can you walk down the hall and not bump into things? Are you socially able to get along with people? Can you unzip your backpack? Can you keep up with the amount of written work? And then in middle school and high school, it's more of, can you start using your own strategies on your own, and that kind of thing. So we do a lot of that, a lot of supporting teachers, and then a lot of training them how to, if maybe it's something that you can't, that is not going to improve, but we'll teach them strategies on how to be successful with whatever that is, and it doesn't have to be just learning differences. It could be anything, but with learning differences, it's like, okay, well, if this has been an issue by the time you're in middle school, here's some ways that you can just work around it. We're working your strengths, manage your weaknesses, and there you go. So that is the OT disclaimer. So I have one kind of for you, Beth, but anybody could answer, is when should a student, this is really good, When should a student disclose their learning differences when applying to college?
So it depends on the student, but they're given a couple of options. They can disclose in the application, but they don't check a box. There's no box you check to say that I have, dyslexia or ADHD. There's a section called additional information. So if the student feels that they need to disclose that their dyslexia has gotten in the way of some of their
SAT scores.
yeah. Well, no, we do test optional then. Yeah, that's a whole other question. But then maybe we write something along that line. But as far as disclosing, you don't have to formally disclose it, but you should be going to the colleges, asking about the disability support services, meeting the director, and just finding out what they offer, because all disability services departments are not alike. And so you need to make sure that they have the services that your student needs. Then once they get accepted and they decide to go to that college, that's when you would submit your documentation to the disability support services. So, it really depends on the student, and we've done it many ways, both ways, and I've not found it to be a detriment to them.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing, is to tour the schools to get the sense of, the campus and all that stuff. But going for the disability part, you have to trust your gut, because you as a parent have no access to that office. It's going to be wholly on to your student. And so I greatly encourage your students to, once they get into high school, be a part of their 504 meetings, be a part of their IEP meetings, because they need to learn self-advocacy skills. And that's a free time that has to be, that we're mandated to do those meetings. So have that participation, because it helps them to understand what they're supposed to be getting, what their accommodations are. If you can get to the point where they're running the meeting instead of you're running the meeting, that's teaching them how they have to do it for the next step. And then that really makes them think, what truly is important. Because for my son, he wanted his extra time in his SATs, ACTs, because the way his brain processes it takes him longer to do that. But when he does the AP test, he does not want that extra time, because it's kind of structured in the same way that his classrooms are, that he doesn't need that extra time, and then he'll feel more stressed out, like, I got to stay here an extra 2.5 hours because I need 20 extra minutes, So he'll but he made the decision, and he was able to articulate that to his counselor and get that set up and like that to meet his needs. So teaching your children how to advocate for themselves, to go in the office, and then how did they feel when they went to the disability office? Did they feel like they were valued? Did they feel like they were going to be supported? Or did they just feel like they got answers to questions that they posed? So it's a real important part, if there are accommodations that are a critical part of college success, to get that warm and fuzzy feeling that you feel valued going into that disability office.
One more thing that you jogged my memory was the FERPA. So it's FERPA. I should know what it stands for, but anyway, it is.
Education.
Yeah, it's the document that you should require your student to sign at the registrar's office to allow you access to their information. Because once they're 18, you have no right to access. And I know this is about learning disability or learning differences, ADHD, and that's what StandUpLD is all about, is about helping students learn how to advocate for themselves. And all the programs that they offer, their student programs, are surrounding that topic. But this, that not only do you need to know, like, to be able to talk to the disability support services, you need to sign that FERPA. But I'd also like, because in this day and age, with mental health issues, you're gonna need it for that too, because we don't know what's gonna happen when they go off to school. And many of my students have anxiety, whether they started out having it before COVID or not. So I would also recommend it for that reason too, a mental health, it's kind of waiver, so that you have that ability to talk to those people.
And I'll just add how it trickles down into the university or college classroom. Most syllabi will have it in there that they don't discriminate. I would suggest making sure the learning, the diagnostic, but the place where they are receiving the services, make sure, I'm trying to say this,
Disability support services?
the student support services, I would look for those specifically on those campuses. The professors are aware of those accommodations. It'll pop up, like we have Canvas, or they may use Blackboard, it pops up. So you're not having to worry if your child is receiving those services, because it trickles down. When it pops up into their Canvas, it'll kind of be like an alert. They do have that. So encourage them to self-advocate, because if you need to go up to that professor to speak to them, the professor already knows that, but they're trying to see if you are willing to also come and speak for yourself. So I do encourage them to be in those 504 meetings, because again, it gives them a voice. It gives them the opportunity to learn the verbiage that they need, and they have a lot of practice to where it's just going to be normal. Like, I know that I need to do this. So encourage them.
Yes.
Question?
Oh, yes,
Not
question.
even a question, but
Uh-huh.
a couple of things. Is that on the FERPA, you cannot see any of the financial records unless you fill out the FERPA. So it's the mental health, it's the Office of Disabilities, but it's also just financial stuff you need access to. And then also with the, having the access to the professors, I know that at UNT specifically, they said that our child had to go to each professor with a letter, and they would provide you with the letter to take to the professors. They never told me that a screen would pop up to let them know that the child had a disability. So that's interesting to me that they would have that. It's great if they do. But they do have to take the letter to their professors.
Depends on the school, but I worked with TWU, and I know they were specific, and then the students would make sure, a lot of them were self-advocating. First day of class, hi, I'm Julie, so-and-so, and I just wanted to make sure you received this, in case my first assignment, or I'm feeling like this, I just wanted to let you know. So you can tell the students who started early with their 504 plan meeting. So get them involved. It's okay to talk. Let them know it's okay to talk about it. It's not like, oh, it's a problem. It's okay. Everybody needs something. And if you can self-advocate, just like he said, then that's golden.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so now I have another question, and this one says that we are concerned for 8th graders. We're not picking on 8th graders tonight, but.
A lot of 8th grade parents in here.
Well, and 8th grade, like you said, is that year where you're like, okay, we gotta figure it out, and so it says, and this really could apply to any grade level. Okay, it says we're concerned that the student will not be ready with their study skills and executive functions that are needed for high school when grades count. What can we be doing now in the preparation for next year? And this leads in really well to talking about executive functioning, and that's a term that is kind of an umbrella term for there different people have different numbers, but 5, 6, 7 different components of that, which is like being able to manage your time, being able to problem solve, being able to break down a task and figure out which part you should start with and how to manage that, emotional regulation, all of those kind of things. And a lot of times, even students that are gifted, that piece for them is a little hard. And so those are kind of some of the basic executive functioning skills needed. And so we'll pass it along, and I'll interject at the end, but I know you have a lot of good things to say about executive functioning.
Deanne, if you don't mind, please make sure everyone has the handouts. So that for 8th and 9th through 12th. So at home, consistency is key. And I always say it's teaching a process. We cannot assume that they know. And I was giving an example, like if you want them to go clean your room, they don't even know where to start. So you have to assume that they don't know where to start. You cannot say clean your room. You have to say specifically what it is that you want, and that's for every task. So if you want them to clean your room, right now I need you to place all of your shoes on the shoe rack. That specific, that concrete, because if they're having executive functioning issues, planning is out the window, organization is out the window. You have to give them what you want them to do, and then move them, and then you release as time goes by. It's not going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It may be time 25. But if they can get those shoes on the rack the 25th time or 25 days later, then you've made an impact. So concrete, relatable, consistency, action items, homework support, again, involve them. How do you work best? Because if you say, okay, I need you to go sit at this desk, I've prepared this desk for you, you sit down, you do your work, but maybe they need background noise, you need to have that conversation with them even before school starts. School is getting ready to start. Let's get these items taken care of. Okay, you want to do football this year, or you want to do basketball, volleyball, whatever it is. Let's look at the dates. Let's put your dates in. And you're teaching them the process. You're not writing it down. What tool do you want to use? Do you want to use your iPad so you can get a reminder? Do you want to use your phone so you can get a reminder? You are giving them the options that you want them to use, and still giving them a way to have a voice. So 8th grade and 9th grade, as hard as it may seem, they do not want to hear what we have to say. Their way is the best way according to them. And then 5 months later, they'll tell you exactly what you told them, because they are listening. But at that moment, just give me my independence. So routines, like I said, how do you want to use this space? Breaking things up, chunking. In class, if we're working on a project, from start to finish, what materials do I need? Walk them through. They do not know how to get started. Managing time, they need to see their time. Don't just say, oh, you have 30 minutes. If you need a timer, give them a timer. And even reading at home with them. I'm trying to think of any. I'm going to pass the mic, and if I have anything else, I'll give some more.
So Dr. Brown?
Yes.
I'm looking at the sheet, and one of the things, and you guys were talking about this earlier, is self-advocacy.
Yes.
That's an area where my kiddo in particular struggles. You know, we had an example even just of late this week when I thought, you know, the most simple solution is, well, why didn't you you had an open note test, you got a new iPad and your notes didn't upload, so why didn't you tell the teacher, hey, my notes haven't uploaded, can I have a set of notes to use for my test? But wouldn't do it for himself, and then he failed the test, and then, you know, afterwards came home, and I was, of course, insanely furious. You're like, why didn't you just ask? They would have given you a set of notes, you know, and it just never even registered. So how do you instill self-advocacy?
So I guess my first question would be, did you assume that he knew what to ask?
Yes.
You assumed, okay.
Yes.
So that's a lot of the problem. We all do it. We just tell them, do this, and they don't know how to do it. In that 8th grade and 9th grade year, as he stated earlier, use that as an opportunity to show them. So if you know that he may have had a test ahead of time, like the day before, you can start by prepping him. Okay, if this happens, then this. Use those if-then statements, and maybe even write it down. Give him a few if-then statements, because if he doesn't know, then we can't assume that he's just going to go up to the teacher. If I have an open note test and I'm stuck on a question, then can I use this section? If this, then this. So you really have to feed them what to say. At 8th and 9th, even 10th grade.
Sometimes they're afraid of authority. You know, they're afraid to ask. Like, it's a fear factor there.
Or
So,
their peers watching.
yeah,
That's a lot.
yeah, their peers are watching. So probably walking them through that would be helpful too.
Well, I feel like I should be able to answer this a lot better in 2 years from now to see if everything I've done is going to work out or not. But you know, that's a learning opportunity, right? So he failed, and if you as a parent can work about what could you do differently. I love the if-then kind of statements. One thing that I've, as a parent part, do you want me to contact your teacher for you? Thankfully, the answer has always been no. But okay, so you don't want me to contact the teacher. What is the issue? Then what are your options? And then what are you going to choose to do? And so you walk through that. Now, most likely won't do anything, but it's starting to build there. And so, you know, it depends on, again, what's their motivation. If grades are motivating, then they'll respond differently. If grades are not motivating, you're going to have to find what's their motivation. You know, I've got a, quote, high-performing 12th grader that has an Eagle Scout, and we're still doing the same 3 chores that we started 6 years ago, and we're still not mastering those 3 things. Emptying the dishwasher, taking the trash out, and cleaning up after your cat, you know. And so it comes and goes, but how we have conversations about your performance and your expectations, those conversations have changed. You know, it's not the mechanics of how we do it, it's the whys of why we want to do it. And so it's gone from the hows to the whys, but it's still the same function, you know. So I have great fear, but I guess they don't have cats and dishwashers and all that stuff in the dorm rooms. They do have laundry.
You might have a cat.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Just kind of a follow-up question to what you said about finding their motivation.
Mhm.
You know, I've got one student that's motivated by grades, but is still afraid to advocate for herself.
Okay.
We've got another 8th grader that doesn't care about his grades
Mhm.
and therefore will not advocate for himself. Balancing the find out what motivates them. How do you balance kind of a reward versus a, punishment, like you can earn extra time doing what you really like versus we're going to take this away, and finding out which one motivates them the most, the fear of losing something they already have or the gaining, because it sets off two separate firestorms in the house depending on which route we go, and neither one of them seem to be super effective.
From what I understand from the research, the way our generation was raised was all wrong.
Okay.
Because we're about losing things and earning things, stuff like that. Okay, what the current research says is you reward the positive behaviors that you're looking for. So if you reinforce the positive outcomes that you're looking for, regardless of what's the motivation, but if you want a certain behavior, you want to catch them being good and reinforce that, as opposed to pointing out when they mess up, and that gets reinforced on them. And so, do we want to have the positive mind cycles of changing the brain, how the brain thinks about itself, or do we want to reinforce that negative cycle and continue that on? So, maybe research 20 years from now will be say, well, they had it right the first time. I don't know. I don't know, but there's a website called PBIS.org, Positive Behavior Intervention Supports.org. Those are all behavior components that the school systems are supposed to be following. These are things that are researched by the federal government, the Department of Education, to come up with these concepts to do that. And for our kids that definitely have the emotional issues, that have those negative cycles, those suicidal type of things, this is the process that we have to change in our own minds, because we weren't exposed to that so much, right? So you have to intentionally practice that, and you have to discuss with your partner what is the positive things that we want to reinforce, and how so do they get extra time, or do they do we take it away? So it's a really hard concept, because I think our discipline system is still set up on your consequences. But even if a child has something called a behavior intervention plan, or they have intervention because their behavior is affecting themselves, those are supposed to have positive outcomes, and they're supposed to replace the negative behaviors with positive behaviors. And so, going to we have to demonstrate, and we have to practice when we're in a regulated state, so when they become dysregulated, they know what their norm is to get to. And so I think the key thing is that we have to point out or practice and reinforce, this is our baseline. This is where we want to be. You're doing great right now. So when you're having trouble, we want to work you back up to this point. And so my older son has Down syndrome, and he's nonverbal and stuff like that. And so when he used to have tantrums and such, that he'd go on the ground and flop and do all that stuff, I'm like, okay, I know you're mad, your endorphins are going crazy and everything like that, but what I need you to do, I need you to walk from the tile to the carpet and then throw yourself down and do your little stuff, right? Because you need to be safe. So that was like the first piece of self-regulation, taking that one step to go from just immediately going down to where it took a moment, met his needs, met my needs, so he's safe and he's expressing that. And as he got older, it was he would spit and that kind of stuff because he was mad. Okay, being mad is okay, but it's not okay to spit. So what are we going to replace that adverse behavior that we're not liking to a positive behavior? So I told him, you need to cross your arms, you need to put your chin on your chest, and you say mad, because he could say that one syllable thing, mad. And his teacher came out, was like, why is he putting his chin on his chest all the time? I was like, well, he's mad at you, He's trying to communicate to you. And so instead of him spitting at you and throwing himself on the ground, which he didn't like, Now he's putting his chin and saying, now you need to respect that and reinforce that, because that's a positive behavior. We're not eliminating, the human condition is to be mad, but how we express ourselves is that way. So taking that example and applying it to, the situation you're thinking, is like, how are we gonna replace the behavior that we are not comfortable with or we don't like to something that's more positive and it can help present themselves and be more successful. And what does that look like? That demonstrate it, practice it, reinforce it, catch it, reward it.
Love it.
That is good. Okay, so I had a couple other thoughts too I wanted to add in, and it was kind of to your question and also to address both of yours really, because all of those are all strategies that of course I use also, but I've learned from my own son, and I now do this with all my students. If something happened like that, they forgot notes, they failed a test, maybe they didn't want to do their homework, maybe they're super late, they have no idea what time it is, and they were so shocked that they missed whatever thing it was they were supposed to be. And they come to me as a parent, or on the OT, they tell me that in my session. I work really hard. It's harder as a parent because I'm like, why didn't you just do it? Why don't you just go ask the teacher for the thing? But I've learned to empathize, first of all, and be aware that it is not intentional. Rarely. Okay, every once in a while maybe. But rarely is it really intentional. They don't want to go through all that hassle. They didn't mean to do that. They genuinely are like frozen deer in the headlights. Oh my gosh, I don't have my notes, my test is here, what am I going to do? Everybody's already taken it, it's quiet, should I get up, should I ask my teacher? Like, it's over at that point. And so I've learned to empathize, and because that has happened many times with one of our 8th graders, and I'll just go, oh man, that's a bummer. Like what happened? And then they talk and they tell me, and I go, oh, okay, well, what should we do next time? What do you think would be good? And they go, well, I don't know. And I go, well, what if, that's fine. What if we try this? I don't know, okay. And then the next time, like you said, when the test is coming up, I go, hey, remember last time with the notes? I wonder if you have them. You think they're there? But I'm not telling them what to do, ever. I'm just, hey, you have a test in 2 days, like maybe we should check the notes. And they go, oh, yeah. So I try to approach it from that perspective. Because it is frustrating, but at the same time, they genuinely sometimes just freeze, just shut down, don't know what to do. So I try to always remind myself of that, and then also just fade the supports. Like maybe initially you're telling them, okay, well, the test is in 2 days, there's your notes, and then the next time the test is coming, maybe you don't mention it, maybe you see what happens, and you kind of fade like that, because you do want them to be independent. Eventually, you don't want to be hovering and doing that, because you can't do that forever. But I find if you're very empathetic towards that, and you're just listening to them and you're offering strategies, that they will come to you more in the future when something happens, instead of, well, now I don't want to tell my teacher because I don't know what she's going to say, but now I don't want to tell whoever's at home because now they're going to be upset. So that is one thing. And then I also, with all this behavior and all of that, I listen to Charles Barkley a lot. He has YouTube and podcasts, and he has a really great way of explaining how the executive functioning, how it impacts. Is it Russell Barkley? Did I say his name right? Who did I say? Charles? I gave him a whole first name. I gave him a whole new brand new first name. His name is not Charles. I don't know who Charles Barkley is, but Russell. Oh, is it Russell Barkley? Okay, so they do slightly different things, but Russell Barkley. And so he's great. Thank you for that. And so, are we supposed to be done around 8?
Whenever you want to, yeah. But you can finish what you're saying about Russell
Barkley.
Yeah, and then whenever you want to, if there's any other questions.
But I think, why don't we take one more question, and then we could wrap up. But everybody in the room, we can hang out for a while and answer some more questions.
Okay, so Russell Barkley, and it's a podcast?
Barkley. He's got YouTube videos and a podcast, and he's in books, and he's an ADHD. He's a neuropsychologist. Yeah. He's Yeah. great.
Executive function.
Yeah, executive functioning, ADHD. He just explains it in really functional
I do
terms.
have one thing I wanted to add,
And I know you all know this, but the executive function part of our brain does not mature in our kids until, especially boys,
Yes.
until about 25 to 30. That doesn't give you much hope.
It's a
But
bummer.
I'm going to give you hope. My son is 27, and I'm starting to see some progress.
Yay! 27.
But so, yeah, so we have to remember that, like, you know, I deal with high school students, so they're 17, 18, going off to college. Really, they're not. They're really like 14, 15. And so you got to kind of think like, you know, that. So,
Be like an 8th grader in college. Yeah.
right, just think about, you know, sending an 8th grader to college.
And you're planting the seeds right now.
Right.
You're planting the seeds and hoping that something will grow from it.
Right. So, but there is hope. I'm just telling you.
There's hope, yes. Well, that's a great way to end our panel discussion. We're so glad that y'all are here and online. And again, we'll stay and we can answer a few more questions for all the people